It's your Wednesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. A lot of stuff to talk about today, and I hope you guys are having a good one out there, enjoying the warm weather, this unusual February that we're having this year. It feels like a false spring, but we will take it right now for sure. And like I said, lots of good stuff coming up on today's show. Jerry Zgoda from the Tribune joins me to talk about Minnesota United. Lots of stuff going on with that team. Still do not have a permanent head coach. Just over 2 weeks before the regular season starts, a weird offseason for them. Jerry telling me don't worry about it too much, but they might not even have their permanent head coach in place and ready to coach the team before the season starts. Just seems kind of bananas to me, but Jerry says there's a reason behind it and that's going to be okay. So I will let him try to explain all of that to you here in just a little bit. The Wild resume play tonight after a long break, but they've been kind of easy to forget about. I've got some Aaron Rodgers stuff and some TV streaming stuff, which usually for me, those are like two of my favorite subjects. Usually that would be front of the show. I've pushed those to the back because the biggest thing right now, what I miss, is the basketball that happened last night. Let's talk about that right now. We'll start with the Gophers. We'll start with the good news. The men's basketball team beats Michigan State 59-56. A different kind of environment right from the start. Kirk Cousins was there. Vikings quarterback, of course. We'll see for how long, but Vikings quarterback as of right now, a former Michigan State quarterback, was there to see the Gophers play Michigan State. Gophers win 59-56. They're 6-5 now in the Big Ten, despite not having a halftime lead in any of those 11 games. All 6 wins in the Big Ten coming when they were either tied just once at halftime or trailing. That was the other 5 times at halftime. In this case, they were down 5 to the Spartans. It was as bad as, I think, 9 early in the second half before they rallied. Cam Christie, the Gophers' excellent freshman, had a big game. I think he made 5 out of 6 3-pointers, some big ones in the second half. A couple of them to get them back in the game, one of them to give them a lead as time went on, and 2 big free throws for Christie down the stretch. Gophers win this game. Now the discussion becomes, is this a tournament team? I did not think we would be having this conversation about this team right now. I thought we could be having the discussion of, hey, this is a better team, right? They're better. We can tell they're getting better. Then, they started 3-1 in the Big Ten. Then they had that swoon where they lost 4 in a row. You're like, okay, is this the real Gophers? Well, now they've won 3 in a row since then. The good road win at Penn State. Any road win in the Big Ten is a good win. And then beating Northwestern and Michigan State in these last 2 at home. Kind of toss-up games in both cases, right? Games that could have gone either way, both in terms of how the games played out. I mean, Northwestern was an overtime game. Michigan State was tied late in the game, but also in terms of the competition level. Those are both teams that are right around 500 in the Big Ten right now, just like the Gophers. If you're going to contend, you've got to win those games, especially at home. So what did we learn? We learned that the Gophers are at least able to close out those games, can be considered in contention, at least in the Big Ten, in terms of, being in the top 4, being in the top 6, getting themselves in the conversation for the NCAA tournament once we get to that point later this season. The energy in the building was one of the big talkers. Ben Johnson, Gophers head coach, talked about it after the game. Marcus Fuller recorded this. Here is Ben Johnson talking about the student section in particular in this game.
I thought our student section was awesome. I mean, that thing was packed through the roof. They brought the energies. They set the tone. I was texting with a friend as I was walking in, and I just said there's a different type of buzz. I just felt it. There was a line of people waiting to get in, and people are yelling at me, and there was a different energy today from the very start, and I just can't thank them enough. Like, it impacts winning so much more than I think they even realized. But the energy they brought, I mean, it definitely carried us in the second half. There's no question about it. I mean, there's times in timeouts I'm getting mad at the guys, but they said they messed up coverages because they can't hear it. Well, that's a good problem.
Attendance just announced at a little over 8,200. It's not like the barn is all the way back. I know this is a Tuesday night game, so you're not going to get the greatest credit anyway, but that's still not the heyday of the barn, but the people that were there were into this game, and it signaled maybe that this team is starting to turn a corner. Now, there's a lot of season left, right? 9 regular season Big Ten games left. Where they go from here will determine a lot of their fate. The next 2 are not easy. At Iowa, team kind of right in the middle of the Big Ten, just like they are, but that's a road game, a tough environment. And at Purdue after that, Purdue number 2 in the country, that will be a daunting task. But they've got a bunch of these other games the rest of the year beyond that. A lot of home games, a lot of games against teams either at their level or below their level in the standings. A chance to get to at least 10-10 in the Big Ten by the end of the year. If they finish above 500 in the conference, you like their chances of at least being considered for the NCAA tournament. So an interesting place for them to be right now. It might come down to like that last week and then the Big Ten tournament. Their last 2 Big Ten games this season are home against Indiana and at Northwestern. Those are 2 pretty big games at the end of the year. Opportunities all up and down the schedule. Just a better team than they were. Dawson Garcia, huge 3-pointer towards the end of last night's game that gave them a 55-52 lead, and then they closed it out. It's a big win for them, a good win for them, and maybe starting to feel a little bit more of that energy at Williams Arena. The flip side of that, the Wolves, the team that's been more successful, obviously, during most of this season, had the big celebration just a couple days ago when they won at home against the Rockets. We found out Chris Finch was going to be the head coach of the Western Conference All-Star team because the Wolves were in the top spot at the cutoff point in the conference. Kind of a 4-way tie going on now at the top of the conference with the Wolves, Oklahoma City, Denver, and the Clippers. They're all right there. Top 4 is pretty important because you get you get the home court in the first round of the playoffs, so there'll be some jockeying for that. That makes last night's loss all the more disappointing, and how it happened makes it even more disappointing. The Wolves had a 22-point lead at halftime on the Bulls, 69-47. I looked at the box score at halftime. I hadn't been watching the game so much, but I looked at the box score, and I'm like, looks like one of those nights where the shots might be falling a little bit too easily. I was nervous for them at that moment because it's like when you make a bunch of threes, when things are falling, when the other team isn't making shots, it can feel easy. All of a sudden in the second half, the Bulls start to make a run. The Bulls start making shots. The Wolves stop making shots. Next thing you know, it's a tight game in the fourth quarter. Next thing you know, it's into overtime. And the next thing you know, the Wolves have lost this game. Couple of markers in this game. Alan Horton, excellent job on Wolves Radio, tweeted, in their last 10 games, the Wolves have lost 4 times when they've had a 10-point lead or larger in the fourth quarter. They hadn't lost a game all season in that scenario over the first 41 games. Right there. That is the difference between the first half of the year and what we've seen in the early part of the second half of the year. Not being able to close out games, not having that late game execution. And again, could just be a blip. Could just be you go through things during the season, you cluster things together, and you get a trend. You get a stat like that where it's like, wow, that's not good. You don't want to see them continue to do that, but that is a problem right now. Another stat that I saw from OptaStats, the Bulls were the second sub-500 team in NBA history to trail by 20 or more points at halftime against a team 20 or more games over 500 and come back to win. The other time was when the 76ers with Charles Barkley in 1988 came back from a 27-point halftime deficit to beat Larry Bird's Celtics 97-93. I mean, you're talking about 36 years ago since this has happened. It's a very specific stat. I get that. It's a very specific stat. To be 20 games over 500, you've got to be a pretty good team. 20-point halftime lead, usually pretty safe, although maybe less so now. But that stuck out to me. That stuck out to me just how rare this is. It stuck out to me that, wow, that's only the second time that's ever happened. That was surprising to me. But the Wolves have to figure out late game execution. It was much better in the beginning of the year, as we saw from the Alan Horton tweet, right? Like if you're up by 10 or more in the fourth quarter, you would like to think you can close that game out. It's not always going to be perfect. You might stumble a little bit down the stretch. You might not get it to the finish line exactly how you want to, but you need to bank those wins. You need to beat teams like the Bulls on the road when you've got them on the ropes. You can't let them back in the game. You can't not execute down the stretch like the Wolves have been doing. So it's just disappointing for them, disappointing because all these games matter, even if they don't, even if there's no individual game right now that's a must-win for a team that's still way over 500, that's still having one of its best seasons. They're 35-16. Like, this is going to happen, but when you do it so many times in such a short span, it becomes a problem. Makes you wonder what they need to do before Thursday's trade deadline. Do they need to add one more piece to this rotation to kind of give them a little bit of extra, whether it's scoring, whether it's, another backup point guard option? Kyle Anderson has not been good lately, not been good this season after being so good for them last year. I mean, right now, the rotation is usually only about 8 or 9 guys deep every night. Jordan McLaughlin only played 7 minutes last night, so really it was mostly like an 8-guy rotation. Because it goes to overtime, the minutes are up, but Ant and Gobert both played 44 minutes last night. Towns played 39, Jaden McDaniels 40, Mike Conley Jr. 36. That's not the kind of minutes you want. You need one more dependable rotation player so you can shave a couple minutes at least off all those guys' minutes numbers. You gotta get to the playoffs fresh. You can't just get there grinding every night. You can't be playing these guys so much. So I would like to see them get creative, find one more rotation piece at the deadline. You don't got to give up a ton to do it. You don't have to, go and get a superstar, but you do need, I think, one more player, one more scorer, I would imagine, one more guy to kind of just release the pressure off this group, because I feel like they're just, they've been relatively healthy this year. They're just in a spot where the depth isn't there enough to withstand what they're going through right now, and it certainly doesn't feel like they would be able to withstand any sort of significant absence or injury. So that's what I want to see from the Wolves going forward. Can they do a little bit more with their roster? Can they get better in these clutch situations down the stretch of the season?
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
Let's talk Minnesota United soccer today with Jerry Zgoda from the Star Tribune. Covers the team. A lot of stuff going on right now with the Loons, Jerry. The opener is a little over 2 weeks away. Sporting director is here. Emmanuel Reynoso is here. That's good news. We still don't know who the permanent head coach is going to be. Feels a little late in the game on that, but before we started recording, you told me that maybe that's not as big of a deal as it could seem like. But give me your perspective on just this kind of interesting off season for the Loons, and a lot of new things, obviously, with Adrian Heath no longer here as the manager.
Well, it's always soccer season, isn't it? And they may think it had a long off season because they lost out, never made the playoffs last fall, but to me it seems like the season that never ends. So, as you mentioned, the new chief soccer office, the sporting director, is here after waiting for Khalid El Ahmad to come in from Barnsley in the third division in England. And like you said, Reynoso is here. It only took him a week this time rather than 4 months. So
progress.
He hasn't done a lot. He's been working on the side. He's got some knee issue, just what do they call him, a knock in soccer, and he's been working with the performance staff. But he is here. Guy they're waiting on is their big, highest paid player, number 1 striker, Timo Pukki, who has been, I think, in Finland with his wife, was expecting their child, and I think that just happened. So they expect him to join. They're going tomorrow morning and for 10 days of training in Coachella. Have you been to Coachella? Probably for the rock shows.
I've not been there. Although last year around this time we were in Palm Springs, and that was very close to Coachella. We almost overlapped with their training there last year, but we did not.
So they're going to go down there and they're going to play 3 friendlies and spend about 10 days, and then come home, and they'll have about 4 days to prepare for that February 24th season opener at Austin.
I was jokingly mostly texting you earlier before we started about, the notion that this seems a little bit dysfunctional, at least to me, right? That they spent all of last year, or most of last year, wondering when Reynoso is going to get here. And then they've kind of had this offseason where they're waiting for their sporting director. They don't have a permanent head coach yet. They've had two interims right now. They got one interim who's leading things right now. They had one previously. Still waiting on a permanent head coach. I was jokingly mostly comparing this to the old Wolves that you used to cover, the David Kahn era. What in the name of Tanguy and Gumbo is going on here? The guy they drafted in the second round back 12 years ago or so, that was apparently, we think, was a lot older than he said he was and wasn't eligible to be drafted, or there was some stuff going on there. We're not at that point yet, but it does seem like there's a perception that this has been a little bit more of a frenzied off season than they might have liked. How do you characterize where they're at right now and how this has proceeded?
Well, like you just said, you say tan guy, I say tar guy.
That's right. That's right. Didn't he write his name down wrong on his draft profile?
We have two different names that we call. So
yes, but you have the scars of the David Kahn era to keep you from thinking this is too bad.
Well, let's bifurcate and have a little palace intrigue, shall we? As long as we're talking about David Kahn.
Yes, that's it. But what about this team? It's not at that level, but it doesn't seem like it's perfect.
I'm sorry, if you want to claim chaos, the one thing I will point to is they did go out and quickly get their chief soccer officer, Khaled. They got him after about 10 days, I think, so they didn't waste any time. Problem with that, he was under contract until next July with Barnsley, so it took a while for them to work that out. For Barnsley to kind of let him go. I don't know if there was a buyout discussions for money or not, but that's what took a while. Now that they've got him here, I mean, you're not going to hire a coach before you hire your sporting director. So, I'm guessing you'll probably see Cameron Knowles, the second interim coach, as you mentioned. I'm betting, given the timeline, that you're going to see him coach the first game, and we may have a hire here by early to mid-March.
So you're thinking they're probably going to go into the regular season with their interim head coach, and then maybe make a move not too long into the regular season?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think they'll probably will go into the regular season with Cam coaching, just because little continuity here. You've had them all through preseason. Plus, it's probably I know the group is probably down to a handful of candidates, but it's still going to take a while to go through all the finals of that. And then you've got, depending who they hire and where he's from, you might have the visa implications like you do with all the other things. So soccer's a little bit different, and the coach will come in. But when they interviewed for the sporting director, they wanted him to sort of establish what the style of play is going to be. So he's going to hire a guy who believes the way he wants to play, which I think with this new guy is younger, more aggressive, more pressing, push up the field a little bit more, maybe play a little bit more like a Liverpool sort of thing.
So is that what we're seeing so far in training? So this isn't really going to necessarily slow them down once they bring in a permanent head coach?
No, I mean, you're going to have adjustment, at least when you start the regular season here in less than 3 weeks. They've been training with Cam leading them, since the first week of January. So that's probably the bigger adjustment with a new guy coming in than going with this coaching staff to start the season. So, but if I had to guess, it's going to be early to mid-March, and by then you'll have played 3 games, so in a 34-game season. So, but I think that'll probably be the biggest adjusting to the new coach, because by all accounts they've taken pretty well. Maybe don't ask Michael Boxall or a couple guys with the older legs, but I think you'll see a little bit of a different style played here now.
How much of a contrast is that to? I mean, I've watched enough of their matches, but that sounds like a decent contrast to what we saw with Adrian Heath. Not like they didn't want to attack, but there was definitely there was a little bit more of a measured, not quite as aggressive all the time approach.
Well, he likes his veterans. I think this news guy is going to go. He's going to play young. They're going to try to play some young guys if they can, and develop some players, and keep some guys in the pipeline. And we'll see what that means for the back line and other places around the lineup. But I think you're going to see right away, a little bit of a change, sort of a balancing of the roster. I mean, the moves they've made so far here before camp opened up had a theme: young, athletic, fairly cheap, to kind of fill out the roster. And then I think you may see them, given that everybody is coming in here late, the coach and Kala, that you may see them, save their money and save any roster spaces they have for that summer window.
Do we know yet what else they might need, what they might be seeking in that summer window, or do you think the next 2-3 months will inform kind of what they might try to do there?
I think probably another midfielder. They went out. They added height to that back line. Now they added a Swedish player who's 6'4". They drafted the kid from Indiana, Bacharach, the guy from Spain, who's 6'4". So now you've got some size there. If either one of them can move in and play right away. And the other thing is just wait and see what Pookie brings him. He started to kind of find his groove late in the season. They spent all kinds of money in their 7 years trying to find a striker, and they've never really found one they can settle on. Maybe now that he's been acclimated, Robin Lood's coming back, so you got the fellow Finn. They can play together. So that's another thing to watch once he gets back from being away for his child's birth.
Given all that, is it hard to know what expectations should be at this point? I mean, I haven't really looked at where they're projected to finish or what they think of as a reasonable goal internally. But what do you think? Is it just kind of because of all the unknowns, is it hard to kind of say, hey, this is a team that should be in the playoff hunt. This is a team that's definitely rebuilding. What do you make of their standing in the league and in the conference?
Well, I think they should be better than they were last year, which means they should make the playoffs. I think this team, I mean, if you look, it's certainly not a roster rebuild at all. I think the question, as we just sort of mentioned there with Pookie, can they get a guy who can, take advantage when you have those? That's what seems like this team. They create all these scoring situations, but they don't have that guy who can just finish it. That's why, as Adrian Heath would have said, that's why these guys are making, $3 million even in markets like Minnesota, because there aren't very many of them. And if he had that 4-goal game late in the season last year, if he can prove to be the guy who can really finish it off, I think they're going to try to expect to build more out of a guy like Fragapane, who kind of went in and out, and you didn't really see him that much last year. And then the whole question is, what happens with Reynoso? How long will it take to get him healthy? Does he really want to be here? There's certainly plenty of questions. As I mentioned, you got Ludd coming back. So, I mean, I think this team should be, in the playoffs, and maybe even better than that if they make the right move or two.
With Reynoso, obviously he's there. He's their star player, and Pookie's making a lot of money right now, and he could score a lot of goals. But the whole team, the whole offense has really revolved around Reynoso ever since he arrived. They got to get that right, or they got to kind of move on. Have we ever gotten to the bottom of what this perceived or real unhappiness was, or where he's at right now in terms of how he feels about being here?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, that was basically, from him being delayed 4 months with no explanation. Now, maybe it was a case of, an issue with his young daughter, or, you hear rumors that, they were trying to force trade or transfer. But I'll tell you one thing about the new guy is he seems to be really big on culture.
Okay.
Nobody's bigger than the organization. So, we'll see. I know he's met individually with all the players. I don't know how it all came out, but at least that process is going along. They did that last week in Tucson, and probably maybe even a little bit coming here in Palm Springs.
If you have a new sporting director who believes more in culture, I mean, I don't want to read too much into it. We don't know what's going to happen yet, but that would say to me that would be a person maybe less tolerant of what happened last year, whereas Adrian Heath was in a gotta win now mode. Give me my best player, and let's not ask too many questions about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter who it is, I mean, the one thing is you get a pretty good price for him. I think if you decide you want to transfer him, but there's no indication. I just get the sense that at least he's saying all the right things, that he wants to be here. We were supposed to try to talk to him today, didn't get that chance, so maybe the week before the season opens up, but to see what the 1 week was delay in coming in this time around. But that's probably the biggest question to answer, and who knows how long it'll take for them to come to an answer on it.
Couple more things for you, Jerry Zgoda. I mean, aside from hiring this new coach, what else do you feel like needs to be kind of addressed? What does this team need to keep working on before the season starts to make themselves feel like, hey, we're ready for this campaign?
Well, they just need to get everybody together, not only starting with the coach and all that, but by the time they'll get ready to come back from Palm Springs, they'll have very limited time with Pookie. Fragapani was gone for a lot of the time for this preseason, getting his green card as well. A guy like they expect a lot this Tani Aluasi, who is young, I think 23-year-old player that I think they're going to try to get a lot of minutes for if they can. So you need time for those guys to get together, get Reynoso healthy, and just time playing together and time training together, and then we'll see, what that leads, and then maybe they can get some momentum once they end up hiring a coach, if that is sometime in March.
Since we're not anywhere near it yet, what would it take to approach the levels of dysfunction that you had to cover and were witness to with the Timberwolves?
Oh, the word that comes to mind is impossible, but
you went through a lot, didn't you?
Oh, hey, I covered 18 seasons and one playoff series.
Oh man, which playoff series did you cover? Was it the
Butler?
Oh, the Butler. So it was wow. So that was your last year on the beat, right? That's amazing. Yeah. Sorry, you're right. This is a team that's been in the playoffs for a whole bunch of years. Didn't make it last year, but what they made it the previous 4 years before that, right? 19 through 22, they were in the playoffs. So even if they weren't great, they weren't anywhere near that level.
No, and I don't think, as we mentioned before, I don't think this is a complete, redo of the roster. I think they've got some talent here. They've spent a lot of money, but they still have some to play with too. If it comes down to that summer window, so we'll see. We'll see if you put in the quote unquote right culture. What might happen.
Competitive rebuild, we might call it. Maybe the Vikings should follow their blueprint. All right, Jerry, appreciate it. We'll probably touch base maybe right before the season starts. Until then, enjoy yourself, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, be sure to bifurcate.
Good stuff from Jerry. I guess time will tell how this plan all sorts itself out. It just seems really odd to me to go into a season, if that's how they end up doing it, go into a season without your permanent head coach named. Even if you've got the style of play in place that you want, just transitioning voices at that point in a season seems very strange to me. I know teams like fire head coaches early in the season, bring new people in. It happens. I get it. Like, sometimes you get coaches fired very early in the year. Dean Evison was fired pretty early in the Wild season this year, for instance. But not having the permanent person in place at the start of the season seems like a bad way to go into the year, and that's an understatement. But maybe it'll work for them. Maybe it won't be as big of a deal as I think it is. And Jerry made some good points along those lines. Hey, they're going to be playing the style they want to play. It's just going to be a transition point when the new person is hired.
Royal Credit Union's Smart Checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union Smart Checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
Let's finish with the cooler. Couple of things caught my attention. Number one, this was I think this was a sports betting site that did this analysis, this research, but it caught my eye about Aaron Rodgers. It said, revealed, Aaron Rodgers is the most popular NFL player in Minnesota. I'm like, well, that sets out all sorts of alarm bells for me. Like, wow, I got to read this. We get these things all the time, like all this research, all this stuff, and some of it's just like the most annoying or just the most annoying or banal stuff you could imagine. It's like the Timberwolves are the 7th most searched team in the Midwest, or so and so is the 4th. People here eat the 4th most pickles. Whatever it is, like we get these things all the time, and most of it's just like, just leave me alone. But this one caught me. So here it says Aaron Rodgers. They did research reviewing Google search data for the last 12 months to see which players are most popular in each U.S. state. The 5 most popular players in Minnesota based on this metric, Google search data, who is searched the most. Aaron Rodgers was searched the most of all NFL players by people in Minnesota, an average of about 84,000 searches per month in 2023. And only half of those were me, which is surprising. Number 2, Kirk Cousins, 81,000, so just below Aaron Rodgers. Number 3, Travis Kelce, 55,000. Then Justin Jefferson right below Travis Kelce. Adam Thielen, number 5 at 30,000. So only 2 of those 5 players are from Minnesota, but it kind of, or play for the Vikings right now, but it kind of makes sense in that if you're in Minnesota, do you really need to Google players on the Vikings that much? You kind of know about them, right? You know what's going on. You're probably getting your information about them from more primary sources aside from having to just kind of go find out, where would I find out about Kirk Cousins? Well, you find out about him from the Star Tribune and other outlets that cover Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson regularly. The players you might be interested in are the ones you don't see showing up in regular coverage all the time, unless you read Ramball and listen to this podcast, like Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, a curiosity point. Hey, how is he doing with the Jets? What happened? What's going on with his rehab? Is he going to get traded? That was all in 2023. So I get it. I can see why it might happen. Just interesting that he is number 1 on that list. Travis Kelce, of course, probably winds up on that list because of Taylor Swift, I have to imagine. You might have heard that he is dating the pop legend. You might have heard that. It's been a minor storyline throughout this NFL season. And in fact, Travis Kelce is the most Googled NFL player in 31 states this year. Aaron Rodgers, by the way, the most Googled player in 13 states. So Minnesota is not alone in this fascination with those 2 guys. And Adam Thielen makes sense, right? Former Viking, longtime Minnesotan. You might have heard, of course, that he played Division II football. You might have heard his whole backstory. Now playing this past season with Carolina. People wanted to know probably what he's up to. Couldn't just find that information regularly. So I get it. Just kind of kind of caught my attention that Aaron Rodgers, the most Googled NFL player in Minnesota this past year. And maybe more seriously, a new streaming platform has been announced. 3 of the heaviest hitters in sports launching kind of a co-app, a joint venture between Warner, Fox, and Disney, which I think has like 85% of the kind of the national sports programming. Those 3 are teaming up on a joint streaming venture that they're going to launch in the fall, putting channels like ESPN, TNT, Fox Sports, all of the ESPN networks under one app. I don't know what to think about this at this point. We'll see what the price point is on this. We'll see what all programming is included. I mean, it sounds like you get all the stuff from all channels, all the Fox channels, all the ESPN channels, BTN, TNT. It's got a lot of stuff on it. It's got a lot of your major national sports. What's the price point going to be, though? I'm reading a story here that says it's probably going to be more than what you'd pay for a standalone regional sports streaming package, so more than kind of $25, but less than kind of your Hulu or your YouTube TV subscription, which is more in the $75 to $80 range. Where it falls on that spectrum might tell you a lot about what people are willing to do with this, whether they're willing to pay for it. To me, it sounds more like a game changer than I think it really is going to be. I don't know if the kind of person who would be interested in this would also be the person that would actually buy this. I feel like that kind of person might just be happy with their cable or satellite, or streaming bundle like Hulu or YouTube TV. They might want all the channels as long as they're getting all these channels anyway. They might want every single channel and not just the sports channels. I don't know. This is going to be interesting. It could be a game changer. To me, it seems like it has more of a potential to be a massive disappointment. I think a lot of it's going to depend on the price point, but that was my initial reaction when I heard about this the other day, that this has the potential to me to be a flop, that it sounds like a game changer in theory, but it has a potential to be a flop. But again, sounds like they're going to launch it in the fall. Could be a major disruptor. It's at the very least a shift in where this is all going. They're trying to take this off platform, trying to take the money, trying to kind of cut out cable, cut out the middleman. If this is successful, it will completely disrupt the cable bundle, because sports are kind of the destination TV, right? They're the live TV that people still watch, still pay for. If this proves successful, it will put a pretty big dent in Comcast, DirecTV, things like that. If it's not, though, it could be trouble for ESPN, Fox, Warner, because they're probably banking on this being kind of the next step for them. So this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out, in addition, of course, to seeing how the regional sports stuff plays out. And again, the reason I don't think this will be as successful as they might hope is that this doesn't include your regional sports networks. It doesn't include, your Bally Sports North type channels where you get your local teams. It doesn't include that. And that, to me, is a more valuable property as a one-off, as a, hey, I'll pay for that every month, as opposed to, hey, just give me all these channels, which I could get anyway with a bigger bundle. So I will be curious to see how it plays out, but I think there's more potential for flop than a huge success. That'll do it for me today. Imagine I'll talk some more Wild on tomorrow's show. They're back in action tonight. Like I said, they're just kind of out of sight, out of mind right now, but maybe they can make a little bit of a push here post All-Star break. Also on tomorrow's show, expecting to have Vikings wide receiver Jordan Addison join me. That should be a lot of fun, so stick around for that on Thursday's show. Until then, I am Michael Rand, back at it again tomorrow.